Thank you for watching Resource Talks. My name is Antonio and I'm in Australia. And more specifically, I'm in Hobart, which is the capital of Tasmania. Tasmania is an island south of mainland Australia, and I'm here to look at a copper exploration project that's operated by CopperCorp. And I'm really only here for a couple of days, just about as long as it took me to come down here, and it's going to take me to go back home. But I want to use the time wisely and look at and ask about everything that I could think of. So anything from the jurisdiction itself, the history of the assets, the regional geology, the core that they've pulled out of the ground already, the team that's pulled that core out of the ground, and I've even got a drone with me to try and take it up to look at everything from up high, so hopefully that's going to be nice. Well, and hopefully I'll do all that without getting bitten by a tiger snake or chased by a wallaby or something, or falling asleep, because the 30-something hour commute, especially on top of the 9-hour time difference, really is no joke. So I'll take you along for the ride with me, but please do pause the screen now and read the warning that's on there, because it's important for you to know that I'm biased. I've been compensated by CopperCorp to come down here and produce this video, and none of this is financial advice, and you should always talk to a professional licensed investment financial advisor with a good long-term track record before you move on, as everything in this video will be general and impersonal in nature. The mineral exploration sector is one of the riskiest places to deploy capital in, so please be aware and do more research on setterplus.ca. Now, I actually want to start off by asking about and better understanding the jurisdiction of Tasmania itself. Infrastructure, political situation, permitting, local communities, endangered species and protected national parks, and daisies and mosquitoes and whatnot, because if you can't get to the project, either because there's no decent physical access, or because the government won't let you drill it, or because you'd be disturbing an unwelcoming local community, or maybe endangering endangered species, I guess, well, what's the value of an ore deposit in the first place if the jurisdiction is not right?
Tasmania is a very mineral-rich district. It's had up to 4 major mineralising events from the Proterozoic right through to the Devonian. So it's resulted in quite a few large world-class deposits of HMS deposits in the Cambrian, as well as tin tungsten deposits of world-class stature as well. So to go with that, there's been a lot of infrastructure developed to support that mining industry, as well as a supportive government, and most of the communities surrounding that have been multi-generational working in the mining industry, so they're all very familiar with the processes and quite comfortable with working in that industry and that sort of development in their neighbourhoods.
How important is mining to the Tasmanian government?
It is a very big part of the GDP of Tasmania. Employment-wise, I couldn't tell you the exact numbers, but for the GDP, it sets up to about 30 to 50% of the gross domestic product of the state. Yeah, that is through production of concentrates and direct transport of ores, as well as mineral processing and other parts of Tasmania. There's some a zinc works down in Hobart for producing high-grade lead zinc plate and metal for galvanising, as well as an aluminium smelter up in the north of the state, and a manganese plant as well up there. So there's a lot of infrastructure that's gone with that, as well as the direct transport of ores and minerals.
What's the current stance that the government's taking toward mining in terms of permitting new mines? Do they want more mining or less mining?
The government's very supportive of more mining, and there have been a few developed recently. Probably the most recently developed new greenfields project would be the Avery nickel mine, which was commissioned in about 2007. It's had a bit of trouble being a nickel mine with fluctuating nickel prices. It's been in and out of administration a few times, but yeah, it's still producing. But the scheelite mine on King Island just opened up recently, the grassy deposit there. So yeah.
So what is the government doing then if it wants more mining? Is it doing something? Is it giving any grants? Is it fast tracking permitting or anything like that?
The permitting process is pretty smooth, particularly for the exploration side of things. So it's very easy to pick up tenements and gain tenure and get approvals for exploration. Obviously, going to the next phase of mining, there's more a little more detail required. You've got to satisfy various different departments, including the Environmental Protection Authority, but a lot of that is fairly streamlined. So you do your development proposal and environmental management plans and submit them to MRT, and then they'll pass them on to all the relevant departments from there to get the approvals and processing done with that. So it's fairly streamlined. It can take, you know, from proposing a development to actually start developing a mine is about a 2-year, probably about 2 years to do all the baseline studies and tick all the boxes, because you'll put in your proposal and then the EPA will come back with guidelines that they want you to satisfy, or any other surveys they want done before you get your final approvals.
Is that just official timelines that you're quoting here, or is it more like what you've seen in practice, like the mines that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, in practice, yeah.
So the nickel mine, how long did it take from it being discovered to it actually producing? Do you know that?
Well, it's always hard to say exactly when a mine is discovered, because it starts off with one hole and then progressing. But from the feasibility study stage through to commissioning the plant was about a 3-year process. Yeah, from doing the full feasibility study, submitting the development proposal, and then actually having it built and producing first concentrates was about 3 years. Yeah.
What does that look like for? Because that's actually interestingly quick. What does that look like for exploration? Like if you wanted to drill a hole, what you've done with CopperCorp, but what's the process look like for you?
Well, for drilling a hole, once you already have your tenement granted and start exploring, you need to put in your drilling proposal to MRT, and that will take about a month. Yeah, if it is particularly sensitive area, it might take 3 months, sort of thing, but quite quick and easy for most of the area that's available for mining, because you can't have your tenements granted in areas that are locked up and not available for mining. So it is quite a smooth process, but sometimes there can be social issues or environmental issues that may slow the process. You know, you just have to tick a few more boxes before you get your permit granted. But exploration is really very easy in Tasmania. Yeah.
How close are you to the government yourself, kind of thing? Where I'm asking this is, we just had breakfast, and you seem to know a lot of people around here. Well, so is it because it's a small place, or is it just because you just know a lot of people yourself?
It's a small place, yeah, and I was born in Tasmania and worked here for a long time, and involved with all sorts of people in all sorts of walks of life, whether it's through sport and recreation, education of my children, or through work. Yeah, so. Yeah, so I do know a lot of people in the mining department and in the community.
So if you want to get call someone up in, like, how far up the Tasmanian government can you go when it comes down to mining? So if you wanted to call someone and be like, what's going on with that permit or something? Yeah,
you can call directly to the Director of Mineral Resources Tasmania.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I'm not sort of talking to the Minister, but Steve and some of the other people have met these people. So the more board level have met them, but from a consultancy level, just dealing with the department, it's it's a fairly small and agile department. You're not you don't get stonewalled by the secretary before you can talk to anything like that. Yeah. It's very easy to contact the people that matter and see if things are going, or if something's parked on someone's desk for what you consider to be too long. You can see where it's at and get them to move it along. It's not too hard. Yeah.
What about in terms of grants? I believe CopperCorp has gotten some money to drill up in Jukes, if I'm not mistaken, which we'll go to as well. But what does that look like? Can you just apply for? Is it grants? Is it loans? What's the money situation?
It's a grant, yeah. So they'll fund 50% of your direct drilling costs for exploration for some approved process. Projects to a value of $70,000, I think it is now. So if you're drilling a $140,000 drill hole, you get reimbursed 50% of that money at the end of the process. So they have to be, you have to submit your work program. They have to make specific guidelines of being an exploration hole. Like, you can't get that for a resource drill out, or brownfields is harder to get approval for that. It's more for developing more conceptual models. So really more, early stage greenfields is what the grants are for.
Are there any strings attached? I mean, do you specifically have to drill in a specific spot where the government tells you, or is it kind of like, take my money and shut up?
Yeah, it's up to you to give them the proposal. So you propose where you want to drill, and then they'll assess that. They've got an assessment panel and decide whether they think that you've met the criteria and they think it's something that they want to invest in. But they're pretty free, they have a limited pool or a budget every year, so if they get 20 applicants, maybe they can approve 15 of them, sort of thing. Yeah. Depends. So they'll rank them against each other and decide which one is the best value for the Tasmanian mining industry and people, and then approve or not otherwise based on that. And apart from that, the drill core has to be submitted to Mineral Resources Tasmania and the results made public within a year. But most junior companies will announce their results, well within that time frame anyway. So it's not really, it's not that onerous a condition.
Yeah. I would hope so, but you'd be surprised. Some of mine will take even longer. Tasmanian government and people you mentioned there, I do want to talk about that. What does that look like socially? And I guess we'll go up to Zeehan in Queenstown, which is supposedly old mining town, and I'll get an idea of whether the people really want it. But what's your expectation, dealing with friends, families, and people here? Do the people want mining?
Yes, they do. They're multi-generational towns, particularly Zeehan and Queenstown and Rosebery, where the mines were established, from about the 1880s. Through to about the 1920s, so people are very happy to support the mining industry. Most people have worked in it for generations. Their fathers and uncles and brothers and cousins, so they're very used to what's going on in the permitting process and everything that goes with it, and quite happy for the work and the income it generates for their communities.
What about from the First Nations perspective, is what you have in Canada? Is there something similar to that here in Tasmania, traditional grounds that you have to respect or consult someone before you can explore or actually get into production?
Not so much at a high level in Tasmania. There's obviously an Indigenous community here, and they've got interest more around the coastlines and inland and further away from the areas that are available for exploration. So yeah, we certainly don't have those sorts of problems here. You have to get an Aboriginal survey done before you can get a mining lease approved, and for some exploration activities. But it's pretty much a ticker box thing. You just submit a form to the Aboriginal Land Council, and every dealing that I've had them has been nothing to see here. You're free to go and do what you want to do. They just ask you, give you a little information brochure on what things to look out for if you do find any artefacts that may suggest that there was some community activity there, but there generally isn't in those sorts of areas. They're fairly inhospitable bits of Tasmania. And, yeah.
So who owns that land then in that case? I suppose in Canada, again, relating to what I know a little bit about, is that it's oftentimes Indigenous owned, the land. What does that look like here? Is it that the government owns the land, like specifically your projects, or what?
Well, the majority of the west coast of Tasmania, which is where most of the mining industry is based, is vacant Crown land, so it's owned by the government, and some of it's available for forestry, and a lot of it's not, is just vacant Crown land. Obviously, things in national parks or reserves are excluded from exploration, so the land that is available is pretty easy to work on. Sometimes you might be working on some private freehold property and you need to negotiate with the landholders, for access and things. But the way the Crown works, all mineral resources are owned by the Crown, not by private landholders. So your ownership for private land only goes to within a metre of the surface. So any of the minerals there are owned by the government.
Yep. What does that look like in terms of use of the land? So the Indigenous communities, would they use the land to hunt, like again what they would do in Canada? Or what is the land really used for? It just kind of sits there.
It just sits there, really. It's just wilderness. Yeah, okay. A lot of it is just bush and. So
there's not much hunting happening around. I can hear really, fishing in the background right now, actually.
Up in these sorts of areas, there's a lot of hunting in the farming districts of Tasmania.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of deer hunting and rabbit hunting and kangaroos. But the Indigenous community is really more coastal based. So they were fishing and diving and harvesting seabirds. It's sort of still a small commercial industry, harvesting some of the short-tailed shearwaters at this time of year, which is run largely by the Indigenous communities. But other than that, that's about as much involvement as I have with them.
Well, so what questions would they ask you, the local communities, when and if you talk to them about drilling? What is it that they're asking you? Are they objecting to something? Are they inquiring information about some specific issue? Or how do you look at that?
Usually with that, if there is an issue with drilling, it will be with a private landholder, just sort of concerned about people accessing their land and that sort of thing. And I've had to deal with that in various projects, particularly on King Island, where there's a farming community there, and most of the landholders were fine once you go and talk to them. They're quite happy to have the activity. It's quite isolated there, and they're quite happy to have someone else to talk to and something else going on their land.
Yeah. Well, people are not the only thing living on these lands. I mean, there's quite a lot of wildlife. There's
Yes,
the
there is.
Tasmanian devil. There's the
Yep.
allegedly there's a Tasmanian tiger. You can talk to me about that if you want.
Yeah.
What about wildlife? I mean, is there anything protected specifically on kind of a provincial level here, specifically to Tasmania?
Yes, there is. Yeah, well, the Tasmanian devil was endangered or listed as an endangered species probably about a decade ago after they had a facial tumour disease. So we have to do. You've got to do a natural values assessment before you, as part of your drilling proposal. So most companies will do that early on before submitting their permit. So you need to have someone come in and just assess what is in the area. And the main species that we need to be aware of is the Tasmanian devil, wedge-tailed eagles, masked owls, and some fish and invertebrate species as well. But they have a natural values atlas. So there's a map. There's quite a good GIS database of where these things are found. So you can sort out pretty quickly where you go there. And if you do have any in the area, sort of some activity you have to do to mitigate that. Get some experts in to do surveys for you and check that there's no nesting things. Just to give an example, we had to get a tailings dam approval for the Rosebery mine about a year ago, and there was supposedly some endemic orchid growing in the area there, so we just had to postpone development of it was a construction rock quarry for a tailings dam development. Had to postpone the development of that until it had gone into the flowering season for this orchid, so we could get a botanist to come out and have a look and see if there were any of these species, which as it turns out there weren't any in the area, so the permit was granted straight after the flowering season and works progressed and finished.
Yeah. No endangered mosquitoes or butterflies or something small that...
Yeah, quite often little endemic things, there can be because some things in little valleys and that sort of stuff, so that's probably a good case in point, the one I just described of that orchid in that area sort of thing. So which didn't happen to be there as it turned out, but we had to do a survey. And
national parks or protected areas, you kind of mentioned that before. How much of that do you really have in Tasmania, specifically in the part where the Razorback and AMC projects are?
There's none, no national parks there. There might be a few, reserves around riverine areas and those sorts of things. Everywhere east of the Razorback and Skyline projects is national park and conservation area. So it's within sort of 10 or 15 kilometres of an area that's about 2/3 of the state is held up in 1/3, of the state is held up in regional reserves or national parks, and they're pretty well regulated.
Where are they?
Mostly in the central and southern parts of the state. So the southwest is a very large national park, and that runs right through to about the northern middle part of the state, the Cradle Mountain National Park. Yeah. And there's various other small national parks in the area. But on the west coast of Tasmania, where the mineral industry is largely, there are small sort of pockets of reserves and things in specific areas.
If the government wants it, the people want it, there's not too many endangered stuff, there's no national park, so it can go through, but you're still going to have to be able to get to it to actually find it. So I want to talk about infrastructure.
Sure. How
are the roads here in Tasmania? I suppose you yourself travel a lot and all that. So we'll go up to the project, so that's probably going to show the roads, but what's kind of the state of the road system here?
The roads are pretty good. They're all weather access, sealed roads to the west coast, and then a lot of the exploration areas there'll be unsealed all weather access, but exploration tracks are, sometimes need tracked vehicles or walking access or light vehicle access. They're supported by earth moving equipment in some areas, or tracked vehicles for drill rigs and things in the exploration stage. But the actual infrastructure for the mining and development is well established, because there's been mining industry here for over 100 years. So there were railway lines, port facilities, pipelines, water, power.
What's the water situation? That's an important part too. Where does it get you? Well, you obviously have a lot of water, but how protected is it, or how sensitive is it? How available is water in those mining communities?
Water is readily available in the mining. They have to establish their own water supply, but it's a very high rainfall district. So long as you've got the storage capacity, it's not too much of a problem. Probably the only place where I've worked that could potentially be an issue is on King Island, where they do have quite dry summers and small, not large mountains. But where the projects with CopperCorp are associated, it is a very high rainfall district. It gets between 3 to 6 metres of rain annually. So there's There's almost too much water.
It almost sounds like it's fun to be here while it's raining.
Yeah.
We saw a bit of that actually. There's heavy rainfall here. Power, how does Tasmania get its power and electricity?
Largely hydroelectric schemes, which were developed for the mining industry, particularly for the Rosebery mine. The electrolytic zinc works was established in the 1930s, and there were quite a lot of hydroelectric power schemes developed at that time. But it's also encouraged a lot of industry to the state as well.
Is that anywhere close to your project? Like, is there, or would you have to put in new power lines if ever something happens there?
Just short transmission lines. There's a power station right at the base of the Razorback prospect. There's a hydroelectric dam at Lake Burbury over the back there, and the John Butters power station is within the EL, covered by the EL, and the same with the AMC prospect. There's the Pyman hydroelectric scheme and power stations in that area, as well as a wind farm and significant transmission lines in that area. So probably another example is going back to the Avery mine, which I was involved with the feasibility study and development of. We had to put in about a 10-kilometre transmission line and substation associated with that project, and that was paid for and facilitated by the Tasmanian government as their own infrastructure upgrade at that point. So yeah, it's very supportive on that side of things. So.
Yeah. Well, and that's 10 kilometers. That's interesting. So you're not talking about having to run a power line that's 100 kilometers long or something like that. Like,
no, that's correct. Yeah, it's all pretty well linked because of the proximity of a lot of these mines to each other. Like I said, there's a lot of world-class deposits all within sort of 5-10 k's of each other, all up through the west coast. So the infrastructure and road systems and power reticulation is well established.
I want to talk about why that is as well here in a second, so we'll talk about the geology, but what about the power cost? Do you know off the top of your head what power costs here in Tasmania on a kilowatt hour?
I think for domestic use it's in the range of about 25 to 35 cents per kilowatt hour.
Aussie that is, I assume?
Australian, yeah. But there's concessions for larger industry, and some of the aluminium smelters and some of those things are about 5 or 6 cents per kilowatt.
Aussie, oh wow, that's like what,
quite
3 euro cents or something like that.
Yeah,
it's quite cheap.
Quite supportive, yeah. And some of the newer projects are, somewhere midway between that, but there's certainly significant subsidies for industry.
Yeah. Well, let's talk high level a little bit about the geology. I'll talk to Steve and Sean and Jono about kind of the specific geology of the projects, but high level, how did Tasmania come to be in the first place? I mean, it's an island. Where did it come from?
Well, Tasmania itself is obviously part of Australia, which is an autocratised part of of the globe, and
but so it broke off of mainland Australia.
Well, it broke off at the breakup of Gondwanaland. Probably about 70 or 80 million years ago. As things drifted apart, and Tasmania sort of slowly being rifted and left behind, I guess, as Tasmania drifts north towards Indonesia. Yeah, so
how old are the rocks that you're exploring in?
Well, the rocks in the AMC are close to 1 billion years old, or just short of 800-900. Yeah, Archean 800-900 is some of the oldest rocks in Tasmania. 800-900 million years of dating from zircon dating, some recent zircon dating by Mineral Resources Tasmania. The actual deposits themselves are more in the 500 to 600 million year old category for the Arthur lineament. The ones in the Skyline project are about 500 million years. There was a major volcanic event. The Mount Reid volcanics are up, and there's a lot of that's one of the major mineralising events of Tasmania that's responsible for a lot of the world-class deposits. So the Mount Lyell, Hellier, Rosebery deposits are all associated with that volcanogenic event. And there was another major mineralising event in the Devonian about 370, 380 million years, where there's a major deformation event followed by the emplacement of various granitoid deposits, and there's some major tin tungsten deposits associated with those, including Renison Bell and Mount Bishop and the Dolphin Tungsten Mine on King Island.
Why does it make sense to have an IOCG in that setting then in that case? Because that's what you're after here essentially at both projects. How would it have formed, or why does the geological thesis for an IOCG make sense given the regional setting?
Well, they're a little bit different for both of them, but both probably related to either Proterozoic granites in the AMC side of things, where there's some magnesite deposits. There may be some scarnification of these deposits, but there are different theories as to how these things are formed. There could be some Devonian input in the AMC from some of the more recent granites, remobilising some of the copper and upgrading, particularly the Alpine deposit. The Skyline project is really quite different. Again, there's some Cambrian granitoids along the eastern margin of the volcanics, which are probably the feeders for the volcanics that are hosting the HMS deposits further over. But as you move closer towards these granites, then you're seeing some more of typical IOCG style mineralisation and porphyry coppers. At Mount Lyell is probably the classic example, which is over 400 million tonnes of high-grade copper and gold that operate for over 100 years, and then just to the east of that there are these IOCG sort of feeder structures for this, which is sort of what we're looking in, particularly in the Skyline area.
So Tim, you like the politics, you like the people, you like the infrastructure, you like the geology. What do you not like? If you had a magic stick and you could change something about either the whole CopperCorp setup or Tasmania as a whole, what would you change?
I don't think I'll change too much. I think it's a great place, a great place to live, great place to bring up a family, and a pretty good area for industry as well. Particularly,
so safety and stuff like that is not a concern for you at all?
Not really. Maybe no. It's pretty good. Transport's good. I mean, anyone born in Australia's hit the jackpot. Really, life is pretty good and easy. And yeah.
All right, so we've talked about the jurisdiction here a little bit. We talked a little bit about the rocks too, actually, and we'll go and look at the rocks later, of course. But it's ultimately up to me as a speculator to decide what the chances of success here really are. And of course, the second part of this video is going to be all about the rocks. We'll look at the geology and everything, as that is, in my opinion, the most important thing when it comes down to speculating on early stage exploration companies. But there's another thing that's important as well. Some may argue it's even the most important thing, and I take that debate any day of the week. But that's the people, the team that's essentially running your money here. So I want to go and talk to the people over at CopperCorp and see if they're the right people for the job.
My name's Steve Swatton. I'm the CEO of the company, and I think the reason why I might be one of the better people for this job is that I've worked both in large and small companies at senior levels. I've worked as an analyst and identified this opportunity as being a great opportunity for a junior company, but it might be challenging in that Tasmania is often looked upon in North American and European circles as really just a holiday destination maybe. But little did they know, and little did I know until I really looked into it, that the mining is an extremely important part of the state's revenue. It's the largest selling foreign investment that they have. They're selling minerals overseas, and there's 4 operating mines. So getting that message across, I thought, was extremely important. So with my international experience and also my knowledge of the North American, if you like, investing public, I thought I might be a good candidate for this type of role.
In CopperCorp, I'm the Vice President of Exploration, which is basically here I'm Exploration Manager.
Okay. You reside in Tasmania as well, is that right?
That's correct. I'm local. I grew up in Tasmania.
Okay.
And I live here again now after moving around the world for some time. Yeah.
What do you think makes you the right person for the job? Like, why is it that you're doing this instead of someone else?
The local knowledge, and also I was the main guy or person to put all this land package together from day dot. So I saw the potential here in Western Tasmania in this group of tenements that haven't been explored for over 20, 30 years. And having travelled around the world and seeing different styles of mineralisation and similar styles of mineralisation, I recognised that there is an IOCG potential in Western Tasmania that hasn't been previously recognised. So we started putting together lots of tenements, and they turned into CopperCorp.
I'm a geologist that lives in Tasmania. I've lived in Tasmania since I was 18. I've travelled overseas, in betweenhand to Norway and to Africa. Before I was a geologist, I used to work on the west coast as a whitewater raft guide doing remote expedition trips. So I feel at home in the rugged west coast bush. to be honest. I feel more comfortable there than being in a city. And yeah, I've now combined my love for the outdoors with a degree in geology, and I'm now doing my master's, which I'll complete towards the end of the year in economic geology. So by combining my outdoor experience with my academic training, then yeah, I'm trying to cover as many bases as I can.
You told me a story about spending 10 days in the bush or something like that on a rafting trip. What was that about?
Yeah, so the Franklin River is it's a river on the west coast of Tasmania, and would have 2 rafts, 8 clients, and myself and one other raft guide would take people down a river and sleep under tarps, no tents, just tarps. And we take all our food for the 10 days, and the last days we finish on a yacht and come back to Strawn. So that's really where I developed my love for the rocks on the west coast of Tasmania, and I went to university to learn more about them.
I'm a consultant geologist, so just some advice and then help out with the team in different places for different projects when required, really. So when they asked me to come in and help with some, specific logging or geochemistry or whatever, I was probably one of the first people on the ground for CopperCorp here. So for the first year or so, helped establish the AMC exploration program, set up some systems and things there. It's more of a consulting role now.
Why do you think you're the right man for that specific job? What's kind of your background? Where do you come from?
Well, I'm from the west coast of Tasmania here, so I know the area very well, and I've worked at pretty much every mine on the west coast at some stage or other, apart from the Savage River iron ore mine. But done a lot of exploration, know a lot of the people and infrastructure, and very familiar with the area. I've got over, I don't even know how many years of experience now. A lot, more than 30 anyway, quite a few. Yeah.
Have you worked in similar settings before, though? I mean, you haven't worked in Tasmania specifically before, but have you worked in similar geologies? Do you have specific experience for the task at hand?
Yes, I do. I used to be, when I was at BHP, head of business development for the exploration division. My only task during that time was looking for copper. So, strangely enough, obviously copper occurs with other things, so it became other things as well.
And that's been successful?
Yes.
Yeah, that's essentially the part that I ask about is, have you made money for shareholders before? Is that why you think you can do it again?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll talk, and I'll meet the rest of your team as well. But what's the team look like right now? As far as I understand, I'm meeting a total of 4 people, so you and 3 more people, but it's probably a bit larger than that, or is that it?
It's tight. There's very few others. Obviously, a lot of the others are just the ancillary. I'm not saying just, they are the ancillary people, but who you've met as the technical team.
I've worked in similar environments in the Andean belt in Chile, early stage exploration again, and I've also worked in Cloncurry at mine sites. So I've worked in exploration and mine sites.
Right.
So put that experience together.
I've worked with copper and gold. So copper was in Africa with First Quantum as a mine production geologist. I haven't found an IOCG yet personally, but I think what we've drilled at Jukes is a success that we did last year. That hasn't been drilled since 1986, and we put in 3 holes and 2 of them returned really, really good mineralisation. So to me, that's a success.
I've been involved with some teams with discoveries and exploration and feasibility studies at the Henty Gold Mine, the Avery Nickel Mine. I've been involved with other startups and feasibility studies of old mines that have been redeveloped, including the Dolphin Tungsten Mine on King Island, and just recently over the last few years going through a lot of the old data and pulling together some models and targets and sorting out the data for MMG Rosebery operations at the Hercules mine, which they're drilling now and finding a lot of gold and lead, zinc, silver.
Let's talk about maybe shareholder alignment in that case. We talk about how you're going to make money for shareholders and stuff like that, but are you one of those shareholders? Have you been buying shares in the open market? Do you own any of the founders' shares? How did your position come to be?
How I came into this company was I was with the previous company. I was essentially approached to join them as a result of my, success with the previous one. And I basically rolled over everything, all of my interests, if you like. I got founders shares. I was divvied out some of the earlier shares, and also I bought into the market at the time. Yeah.
What's your average cost of the shares that you own?
22,
now?
I think.
That's higher than the current market price. Yeah, okay. Wife must be happy.
There's a lot of people not so happy. Yeah.
You said you put this package together. Does that mean, so you were there at the start with CopperCorp, right? You essentially put the company together, is that right?
I put the package of tenements together, yeah.
Okay.
Along with
Yeah.
Sam Garrett and
What about your shareholding in the company? Is that something you've bought in open market and financings, or is that primarily founders' shares? How did that come to be?
yeah, the majority of my shares were founder shares.
Okay. So what was the value of those shares the founder shares when you got them?
The founder shares were 4.5 cents.
Okay, and then afterwards, because you said the majority is founders, but afterwards, have you participated in financings or bought in the open market or something like that?
I didn't participate in the last financing, which I've only done one, but I hope to participate in the next one.
Right. What about royalties? Is there royalties on this package?
We have a royalty on two of the tenements, the two original tenements,
Okay.
which is the Alpine and original Skyline tenement. But all the other ones, there's no royalty.
There's no royalty. Okay. Does anyone within your company own those royalties? I mean, you personally, or anyone on the board, or any of the managers or whoever?
Myself and the other founders have a split share of those royalties.
On the Alpine and
Yes.
yeah. Okay.
Alpine is,
How much is that royalty?
I think it's 1.5%, and there's
Okay.
a buyback option there.
How much is the buyback option worth, do you think?
I think it's 2 million
Okay.
for 1% or something like that.
Because that's what I'm trying to figure out here, Sean, is what drives you really? I mean, are you after making money on the royalty? Are you after making a discovery? Do you want to make money on the stock? That's essentially, as a speculator, what I want to know. So what drives you?
What drives me is to make a discovery.
Okay.
So I'm not too concerned. I mean, yes, if we make a discovery on one of those tenements, that would be nice. If it became a mine, I'd have a share of that royalty. That would be great.
Yeah.
But, you know, we're talking years down the track. Obviously, I want to make a discovery. I want to create value for all shareholders.
Is it the only job that you have right now is CopperCorp? This is what you do full time?
Yes, I'm a director of K2 Gold, but apart
Okay.
from that, yes, I spend 90% or more of my time on this company.
I believe you're involved with another company as well. So this is you basically do two things. So CopperCorp and I believe it's an Aussie company. What's the name again?
Yeah, Flynn Gold Limited.
Yeah. How do you split your time between the two companies? Which company gets more attention, you say?
The majority of my time is with CopperCorp, so about 75 to 80% of my time is with CopperCorp.
Right. And then what does that look like for you? What's a typical, is there, I don't know if even there is a typical day for a geologist. What's a typical day in the life?
There's no typical day, but I try to spend as much time as I can on site in the field, supervising the guys, help guide them, managing the programs, what we're doing next, getting contractors together, also looking at a lot of the technical work, looking at the data, looking at the new data coming in, putting all that together, putting the package together, what does it mean? So there's a lot of office-based work as well. Yep, so I do a lot of the office-based technical work, managerial stuff, I do some of the accounts as well, HR, I've got a lot of roles
Right.
in this manager position. So
What's your favorite role, HR?
no, technical work's my favourite.
No, I've got a few different different clients at the moment. Usually, you know, for business structure, always like to have two or three. Just some go hot, cold, but yeah, CopperCorp is certainly one of the main ones at the moment.
Yeah.
Yep.
So how much time would you say CopperCorp gets, or how much of your time does CopperCorp get from you?
Probably about 25% at the moment, I guess. It has been more in years past, but at the moment, yeah, probably 20 to 25%, I would say.
Right.
Yeah, which will come and go depending on their requirements, you know. Yeah.
If you had it your way, would you do this full time? Like if they have some discovery success, Steve comes to you and like it says like we need you on full time, would you drop everything and do CopperCorp?
Well, I'm coming towards the end of my career, so I could do it if it was the right project, that sort of thing. If the Jukes project or one in particular looked like it was going to go to the next level for a drill out and feasibility study, I'd be more than happy to jump on board full time with that sort of thing. Yeah.
One last thing, and this is an Aussie question, so we're in Australia, might as well ask that. But would you mortgage your house to drill the project if there was no other way?
I think I would.
No,
How come?
I've got a family. I've got to have a roof over their head.
That's fair.
Yeah. Do I believe in the project? Yes. And yeah, would I work on the project out of passion rather than for pay? Yes. But but I wouldn't be mortgaging my house.
I don't know if I will mortgage my house, but I would certainly, take shares or those sorts of things, or in lieu of payment, that sort of stuff. So,
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah. We don't really need a house anymore. My kids have grown up and gone, so I suppose I could mortgage a house.
Right, now it's time to head into the actual field and look at CopperCorp's project. Specifically, we're going to look at two of them, Skyline and AMC. They're both in the eastern part of the island, near the coast of Tasmania, which is about a 4-hour drive from Hobart. And our first stop is a small town called Queenstown. All right, Steve, so we're standing at the income of Queenstown, which seems to have a kind of a big mining history. I mean, everything is a nod to mining. There's a hotel, it's called, where we're staying, it's the Silver Hills Motel. I believe the restaurant of it is called the Smelters Restaurant. There's a Gold Rush Hotel. Everything's really, you go into town, everything is kind of mining related, but it seems like it might have kind of stopped or grinded to a halt. So maybe why don't you take me back? What happened here? What's the history of this town? And yeah, talk to me about that.
Well, gold and copper was discovered here in the late 1800s, and by 1894 there was a copper mine developed here at Mount Lyell, and at that time, over the ensuing years, maybe 5,000 people moved to this general area, and it actually continued mining for another 100 years. And then in 2017 there was an unfortunate couple of incidences, deaths at site here. So the mine was closed by the government to let the government company at the time take care of their affairs. It never reopened. The copper prices were significantly lower than they are today. So therefore, it went through the hands of a couple of companies, and at the moment it's with Sibanye, who are doing a feasibility study, and we're expecting the results in the next couple of months.
What happened? You said a couple of deaths. Is it something that happened in the mine, or what happened?
Yeah, it was very unfortunate. One person fell down a shaft, and the other one was the victim of a surge of sand that went into one of the adits that was down there. So it was just one of those unfortunate things that occasionally happens in mining scenarios. But yeah, it was enough for the government to say, "Hey guys, got to stop this and take care of your affairs."
Yeah. So it's nothing necessarily related to geotechnical stability or anything in terms of the environment, because I read a couple of years back there was a forest fire or something like that. Is that a challenge here?
There are forest fires. Look, the climate here and the environment is not dissimilar from northern BC. They do have them, but they're pretty well contained. I mean, the last one that was of significance was 50, 60 years ago. But no, I mean, they are contained, and I don't think it's going to be an issue here.
Right. What about the rest of when I say environment, I mean, it's very scenic, driving up here, it's very beautiful, everything looks very nice. And I'm thinking almost too nice? I mean, could that be a challenge from the perspective of, national parks or something they have around here where the government is telling you don't do that there because it's a protected, tourist area or national heritage or something like that?
This is one of those few places in the world that I've come across that has a very good interplay between a tourism industry, a currently mining industry, and a past history of mining. There are places in BC again, there's places in Sweden, there's places in Norway that have this type of interaction between the three. The different parks here are very well constrained. They're well known where they are. We have one further to the north, another one to the south, the Franklin River. And within this area here, there's 4 operating mines, all within 50 kilometers of each other. And the situation is that you're allowed to do exploration and you're allowed to do mining probably within this area without too much pushback. And because everybody and everything is related in one way or another to the mining industry, even if it's the tourism that you saw taking place in Queenstown, the curiosity of it is that the ancient mining techniques that they were using here and looking at the different ways that they were mining.
So no national park, like we're not standing in a national park, because it does look like a national park.
No, there's no national park here.
No protected mosquitoes?
Nothing's protected.
Protected daisies? I can keep going.
No, nothing I'm aware of is protected here, but we do have to look out for the certain types of fauna that are here are revered, like the Tasmanian devil that everyone's heard of. They were almost wiped out a few years ago. They're now coming back in larger numbers, but yeah, like any mining exploration scenario, we have to be aware of the environment that we're living in, but there's
It-
nothing endangered.
And you've done those environmental based studies or something that when you want to drill something at Jukes or whatever that we're going to go and look at later, does the government come along and kind of check and tell you, oh, that you can drill, you cannot drill here? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have to do, with a third party, we have to do an environmental baseline study. The government do come out from time to time to check up on it. And yes, there are certain areas that they advise you to stay away from, and it's usually quite easy. It's not onerous here at all. It's perfectly workable.
And this is a town that's closest to your Razorback project, if I'm not mistaken. So that's Linda North, Linda South, Hikes, Jukes, Darwin that we might go and look at. What is it that we're going to be looking at? What is this project?
So we're looking at the southern extension of the Mount Lyell copper gold mine, and we've got the 25-30 kilometers to the south. The rocks are very similar to what we see here at Mount Lyell, and what we've got is identified 5 key targets, of which we have maybe 20 that we're also reviewing, but 5 key targets. We've already drilled the Darwin one to the south. We've more recently drilled the Jukes with 2 holes, and the Hides one, which is looking particularly exciting because of the coincidental magnetic and gravity anomaly, is one that we're doing some geophysics at the moment to try and prove up some good drill targets.
What is it that you're going to be looking for in terms of size and grade? Do you have an exploration target size in mind that you're working with, or how big? How big could this thing get? What's the profile in terms of grade?
Yeah, this is, the jury's still out as to what exactly we're looking at here, and you've had various academic papers talking about porphyry style and IOCG. It's probably a mixture of the two that we're dealing with here. So if you're looking at anything around the world, some of the largest mines in the world are of both categories, porphyries and IOCGs. But I think what we're actually looking at here is probably, tops a couple of 100 million tons of material at plus 1% copper. That is really the target we're looking for. It's probably going to be a high-grade underground type target that we're targeting at the moment. And yeah, the grades seem to be consistently about % copper and 0.3 to 0.4 gold.
Let's go look at the targets. Herchan, so where are we standing? Maybe first show me where we are on the map so I don't get lost.
Yeah, sure. We're just standing at the southern edge of the Mount Lyell mine lease.
Yeah.
And we're looking out to the east over our Linda copper gold prospect. That's CopperCorp's copper gold prospect, which is immediately adjacent to the Mount Lyell mine. I'll do that again.
Yeah. So the mine that we just looked at with the water inside and everything, what's that?
That's the Iron Blow.
Okay.
Yes.
What do they do there? What do they produce there?
That was a copper gold ore body. That was the first ore body ever found here at Mount Lyell.
Okay.
And that was the start of the mining rush here on the west coast of Tassie. So they found that by finding alluvial gold in the creek, and they followed it up to the source, which was a large porodic iron body.
Right. And then when we look out here, I mean, there's the road. We saw a bunch of people and all that, and then there's mountain bike trails. So there's some tourism happening here. What does that mean for your kind of social license to operate, or where does that tie into your story?
Yes, there is some tourism and it's growing, but it is a historical mining town, and the mining and the tourism is coexisting.
Okay.
A lot of the people come here, they do tours of the mine and look around, and it's been designed that way as well. So the tourism here includes the mining history and industry.
Right. And so this is the Linda, what did you say, Linda North?
Yeah, Linda North and Linda South. The south is under the big hill. This is the deep target.
Right.
So what we see there is alteration systems similar to what we see at the Mount Lyell mine. But that's never been drilled. Neither has Linda North. Very similar alteration, some anomalous geochemistry, copper and gold. That's also never been drilled. So it's some new ground that we've recently picked up, and we'll be working on to build up drill targets there.
This is a pretty big hill, though. Is that in terms of topography? And well, this is my first site visit, so yeah. I don't really know. Is it a big hill? Is it not big? Because to me, it looks like a big piece of mountain. So if you find something under it, what are you going to do? Just take the top off, or how is that going to look like from the perspective of topography?
But it's probably a medium-sized hill, and it has unmineralised cover on top. The target here would be for an underground resource, so okay. We're not targeting open pit. we'd be looking for underground resource.
Right. So you're not going to have to take the cap off, essentially. That's one. And that's the Linda South.
Linda South, yes.
Linda South. And Linda North is that way, essentially.
Over here, yeah. You can kind of see the yellow-orange rocks in the distance.
Yeah.
The cover rock there has been removed.
Right.
So you can see the alteration, which is the same colour as we get here around the mine.
Okay.
Except this area hasn't been explored for whatever reason in the past.
And the rocks that we're looking at here, where we're standing, is that similar to what you have over there in terms of, in terms of lithology, I guess?
Yeah, it's similar, and it's in terms of where we are in the system. Here at Mount Lyell, we're higher up in the epithermal, sub-epithermal level system, and we see the similar alteration at Linda North. So porphyroite, sericite, a bit of alunite, and that's indicating there could be similar mineralisation under that hill than what we get at Mount Lyell.
In terms of the city, I believe there's a city close by. I think it's right behind us or something.
Queenstown's behind us.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's what, a medium-sized city, or how big is it?
I think it's 2,000 to 3,000 people. It's a small town.
Right.
Yeah.
So if this ever becomes a mine, would you have enough people to come over and work and then they go home at the end of the day, or what would that look like?
It would probably be a combination of locally sourced and drive in, drive out.
Yeah.
That's what most of the other mines do in
Right.
the area.
Okay. How's the priority of these targets, or the way you see them? Duke has the largest star, so I'll assume Duke's is the largest target. We'll go look at that as well. But in terms of where Linda South and Linda North rank, what do they rank?
Currently they're just as high ranking, but they're less developed exploration-wise, so they're at an earlier phase. Jukes and Darwin have drilling in them,
Yeah.
so they're more advanced, so we know more about them. So they're kind of higher up in the hierarchy. And Hydes hasn't been drilled either, but that's one of our priority targets that we're trying to develop up.
What's your favorite child? If you had to drop everything and just keep one target, what would you keep?
At the moment, I'd keep Hydes and Jukes.
What do you like about it?
Yeah, this is Jukes. That's one of our priority targets. We like it because the historical workings here, so significant mineralisation, high-grade mineralisation, copper and gold.
That's right there behind us?
This working's right behind us.
Okay, that's what was it, the tailings that we're looking at? Kind of.
That's a Malek dump, so it's a rock dump that's coming directly out of when they were building the adits.
Okay. And again, I'm going to ask you the question of topography, because there's these hills and stuff like that. Is this a more challenging target in terms of topography, or because the road that we came up to, and you've got the drill collars here, did you guys have to put that in, or was that here?
This road was an existing historical track that we just refurbished.
Yeah.
But yes, some of the areas where we want to drill will be more challenging. So that means we may have to do helicopter drilling to start with. If we have success, we'll be able to apply to put in some roads and then drill off roads.
Yeah. So that hill on the other side, is that is that something that's of geological interest to you? That's still within your tenements, right?
Yeah, this is all in our tenements. Yeah, this is Mount Huxley. On the other side slope there is copper mineralisation as well, and similar alteration as what we see at Jukes.
Right. I can also see a lake or something from here.
It's Lake Burberry. That's a hydroelectric dam, so that's artificial dam.
Could that be a challenge in terms of proximity to your workings if you were ever to discover something that's significant?
We don't perceive any challenges there. There's multiple mines within 5-10 kilometres of that infrastructure.
Okay, historical mines?
No, existing and operating. So we were at Mount Lyell earlier.
Yeah.
That's only like 4 kilometres away from the mine, from the lake. Henty's similar distance, maybe a bit further, but also that's hydroelectric power.
Yeah.
So it's all green power here.
What do you pay for power here, kilowatt hour? Is that?
I couldn't answer that question.
Yeah, we can. I'm thinking about it because it'll probably be in Australian dollars. So to me, that's kind of like a kangaroo peso. So I don't really know what that's worth in the first place. What is the? I was thinking about when we were driving up here up the road. There was also these reddish rocks to the side. What's that? That's all on your tenement, I think, as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly the ones you're looking at.
Yeah.
All the ground you've driven through now
Yeah.
since Mount Lyell is basically all our ground.
Yeah. But what is it that I am looking at? It's kind of like reddish, brownish rock. I don't know if it's outcropping or not. Yeah.
A lot of that is the pink potassic and magnetite alteration,
Okay.
and that's overprinted by the darker green
Yep.
chlorite magnetite alteration.
So you keep seeing that same genetical fingerprint across the package. So you drive from one end to the other, and you keep seeing that K-feldspar, I believe, so hematite alteration with the greenish stuff, essentially.
That's correct. We see that on a district scale level.
Okay.
Yep.
Sulfides as well, chalco.
Sulfides occur locally, and that's where how we define our main prospect areas. Yes.
Right. Okay. So how far is it from where we were just standing before at Mount Lyell?
At Mount Lyell, we're about 10 k's in a straight line.
10 km is a straight line.
Yep.
Okay.
And more or less by road, 10 kilometres. So.
And then it goes up that way. How far?
It probably goes another 20 kilometres to the south,
Okay.
which is all our ground.
Wow.
So through the Hides, South Darwin, and then we have a new tenement at the very southern end as well.
Right, so from here, we're actually going to go underground. There's an adit. The adit is essentially basically a horizontal tunnel, if you will, that's driven into the side of the mountain, of the hill, and it helps you access geology. They used to put these back in. Apparently, CopperCorp has plenty of those across the package. We're going to go into one of those that they sampled. It's going to be adit number 3.
And we're looking at the actively leaching copper carbonate and oxide material, which is malachite and azurite. That's the green bluey mineral coming out, and that's coming out directly from the mineralisation zone. So underneath this oxide layer there is fresh sulfide mineralisation.
So what does that mean? Because if there was no water here, we would just see brown rock essentially. But because there's water, it's taking out the mineralization and bringing it up to where we can see it. Is that?
That's exactly right. It's leaching the copper out of the rock and then precipitates it when it hits the oxygen.
What does that tell you? Like, does that mean? Well, it means there is mineralization, but it doesn't tell you anything about the grade, or what does it really tell you?
It doesn't tell us anything about the grade directly. It tells us there's a significant amount of copper in the rocks that would deserve follow-up. But we wouldn't sample this per se because that would give us a false anomaly. This would be really high grade copper. So when we sample this, we sample the other side of the adit where there isn't this green oxide material, and therefore we get a more representative sample.
Oh yeah, the channels.
Yeah.
So those are the channels that we look at.
That's right.
Is there a risk of the geologist sampling this kind of being picky though, like picking out the specific zone, or do you have any rules in place? Because you say you didn't sample this, is that because you chose to, or how does that work?
No, we sampled this by what's called a continuous channel sample. It's like a horizontal drill hole, except we're using a hammer and a pick. But we take a 1 metre section, 1 metre sample along a line, and we catch everything below on a tarp, and then we homogenise that and put it in a sample bag. So hopefully that's quite representative of what's there.
What does that tell you about drilling? Like, how far above us are you drilling?
We drilled below us. Our first hole we drilled directly below this adit, about 70 metres depth vertical. And the second hole we hit mineralisation further down the hole, about 500 metres vertical. So it's proving that there's an extensive system here.
Right. And this mine working essentially, or what is this? Actually, where are we?
This is the Jukes.
Yeah.
It's called Jukes number 3 adit.
No, but I mean more like who made this? Why? What is this?
It's a historical adit, so it was mined, put in about the 1890s, early 1900s by some miners. They were looking to develop some copper gold mines here for some smelters that were getting put in about 5 to 10 kilometres down the road. Those smelters eventually failed, and this mine closed at the time as well.
Right. What this mine closed? So it's nothing to do with the geology or the the stability or something of the mine.
Nothing to do with stability. Basically, Mount Lyell became the centre of mining, and that supported the mining industry for over 100 years. So all these other smaller things just got forgotten about, basically. It's been explored on and off over 100 years or so. So there was some drilling in the 1980s, but no more drilling until we just drilled last year. So it hasn't been drilled in over 40 years.
Now, going out of the ground here, we're going to go and look at some of the core with Jonathan, or as Aussies would call him, Jono.
All right, Jono, so we're standing here looking at the rocks. I don't really know what I'm looking at, so you're basically going to have to lead me through it. What am I looking at? Show me where the mineralization is.
All right, so what you're looking at, this is the wedge hole we drilled end of last year. We completed it in November. The wedge hole came off the parent hole, JDD002, and we drilled this through to a depth of 569 metres. This is the end of the hole here at 545 metres, which is where we got the highest grade copper associated with late chalcopyrite veins.
Right. Is that sulfides?
Yep, that's chalcopyrite and lesser pyrite.
Okay.
Yep.
So now you see that I can pretend to know what I'm talking about. I really don't. Is that what you want to be seeing for this kind of a system?
Yes.
So when you pull out this core, what is it that you want to see so that you know that, okay, this is an IOCG, we are on the right path?
We want to see magnetite, we want to see chlorite, and then as we get through our inversion models, when we're on the edges of the magnetite anomalies, we expect to see sulfides, and chalcopyrite is a sulfide we're after.
What about the I part of it, iron? Shouldn't you be seeing hematite alteration as well?
Yeah, you do, but here the hematite is actually magnetite. So if you use my magnet pen, you would see that it's quite magnetic. There is a significant iron content in this rock.
Right. Yep. Is this telling you anything about the depth of the system? Because you kind of described it in steps. The sulfides, how deep are they, and what are they telling you about where the sweet spot of the system is?
Well, when we talk about the sweet spot of the system, you want to be talking about your distance from the granite. That's your heat source. So the rocks we have here, this is what we see at Mount Lyell, the deeper systems of the alteration of Mount Lyell, chlorite and magnetite. Does that help answer your question?
Kind of, because I'm really thinking, what I'm thinking about here is when you go and drill it, how deep are you going to have to keep going into the system to keep pulling out the good stuff, essentially?
Well, we're open at depth at the moment. This is 550 metres below surface. We see anomalous rock chips at surface, and we perceive this to be a vertical lens, one of 4 or 5 that we've drilled so far, and has been historically drilled. So, yeah. Yeah, it's open at depth and it's open along strike, so it's yeah.
What about the more boring rocks, if you will, and that's kind of quote unquote boring rocks? What are we looking at there? Kind of the reddish stuff here, and I'm not calling that boring because my hair is reddish, so we shouldn't say that. But what are we looking at here?
Yeah, so the alteration Jukes is you had a prograde, so as things are heating up, you've got potassic alteration with chlorite, and then the system will pulse. So it won't just go up and then back down in a nice curve. So we're seeing repeated events of alteration. As the system's cooling, you get a retrograde alteration, and that's the chlorite. So the chlorite will overprint the potassic, which is the red, and vice versa. But predominantly you see the chlorite overprinting the potassic. And the chlorite is what's bringing in the chalcopyrite, the sulfides. And that's the very last thing that we're seeing in this system, is that the chalcopyrite is coming in right at the end. So all these veins are clearly later than the chlorite case bar alteration.
Does that overprinting make it more difficult for you to target the right spot of the system and drill what you want to drill?
No, the magnetite's a really useful tool for us to target drilling from. So yeah, your traditional magnetic surveys work really well for that, and IP will pick out the disseminated sulfides as well. So the fact that we have magnetite, that's really useful for us.
So essentially, kind of to summarize what I'm looking at here, by color, because that's how a non-geologist would kind of look at these things. What is the gray stuff, is sort of the matrix in between everything, that's just what?
Chlorite.
That's chlorite.
It's more green. So it's a dark green.
Okay.
So this is quite intense chloride alteration. When it's weaker, it'll be a more vibrant green or a light green.
Right.
So yeah, and the red, which you may think would be a hematite, but it's actually case bar. So potassic altered.
Is that good?
Yeah, yep.
Better than hematite?
For
In
where
this
we are
case?
here, yes, in
Yeah.
this case, but IOCGs also have hematite. It just depends where you are in that evolving fluid.
Right. And then the yellowish kind of metal color, that's the chalco
Yep.
that you said, so that's the sulfides. Then there's some
We
over
also
here.
get gold with the chalcopyrite, so.
Right, and then with some of these over here, there's kind of white specks, like over here.
Yeah, so that's carbonate, and that's recent petrography work we've had done. That's with the chalcopyrite as well. So it's a late carbonate chalcopyrite at the end of all this alteration. So yeah, these rocks were originally a rhyodacite composition. So for the audience, we'd call it a dacite. But yeah, they're so heavily altered that the primary textures are pretty well obscured. So you really do, other than quartz and hornblende, most of the primary textures are gone. So petrography is really key to understanding where you are. And that recent petrography work does show that we are in the same rock suite as you have at Mount Lyell as well.
Most of the core looks coherent, as in it's not broken up a lot. How are drilling conditions for you? Is it tough? Do you get core loss at times? How does that work?
Very good drilling conditions. Probably, yeah, very, very good. We don't get significant core loss. This hole we maybe had 30 centimetres over the whole length of hole, and yeah, that's even with drilling through what were previously considered quite significant faults. But yeah, no, drilling's really good. We get good meterage. So yeah.
What's the first thing you would ask about this? Like, if this is the first time you're seeing this core or you approach it, what's the first thing that you would pick up? What's the first thing you would ask?
I would want to know how much of the rest of the hole looks the same as this.
How much is it?
Yeah. How much is this percentage?
Yeah.
Well, we have 19 metres at 0.8% copper and 0.5 gram per tonne gold. Our hole above this one, which was drilled to the same azimuth, we had 130 metres at 0.35% copper. And this one was wedged off that hole at the bottom. The alteration that we see, that the chlorite magnetite, and you've got to remember this is the third hole that's been drilled up at Mount Jukes. We see that from 70 metres in the very first hole. And after that 70 metres in the first hole, we're straight into mineralisation. So that prior to 70 metres, it's the Eastern Quartzpheric sequence, so a different rock package. So that fault that bounds the mineralisation, we enter that at 70 metres, and then we're into the altered dacites, which are chlorite case bar.
And it's again, it's the reddish and the metallish stuff that you want to be seeing. How much? We see that a lot in the specific core boxes that you've pulled out, but how much of the core that you've pulled out of the ground actually looks like this? Does the majority look like it, or is this more of an exception?
Yeah, definitely the majority looks like this. When we're in the centre of the magnetic inversion models, so where there's a high magnetics, there's more pervasive magnetite veins, and we get semi-massive sulfide veins as well, but they're mainly pyrite. When we get to the edge of that magnetite geophysical anomaly, that's where you get the chalcopyrite dropping out and the chlorite. So remember, as I was saying, you want the system when it's cooling, so as it's cooling and we get to the edge of the magnetite, that's where we want to be.
Right. Moving on from here, from Queenstown, and the Razorback project, we'll go a little bit further up north. It's about a 30 or 40-minute drive from here to a smaller city called Zeehan, or, well, as the Tassis would say, Zeehan. Right, Steve, so we're standing in your, what is it? Core shed field office?
Field office, yeah.
Okay. This is in Zeehan, which I'm not supposed to pronounce Zeehan. I'm supposed to, what am I supposed to? Zeehan?
Zeehan.
That's a Tasmanian way to say it. What is this? Is this also an old mining town? Is it a current mining town? Because on the way in, I saw there was something that said, again, something Silver Hills or Silver City, stuff like that. What is this town?
Yeah, this is a silver mining town. It's not. There's no mining per se going on in town here. It's a dormitory town for other mines that are around here, like Renison and Rosebery. There was going to be a mine here opening called Avery, but it never did open. So all of the accommodation that you see out there are single man's quarters, if you like, small family homes. But yeah, this is a hub for a mining community that operates based out of here.
Why did the mine never open?
Nickel prices fell down. So, you know, it was always marginal and it never quite made the grade. But they did a lot of work up there to bring it into production, but it never actually came about.
What's the history then of this town? It was just built to support the mining industry, essentially.
Well, alongside Mount Lyell, this was another area that's heavily prospected, and like Mount Lyell is copper gold, this area was silver and base metals, and so this became a silver town. And so when we drove through there earlier, there's some old towns there. This was considered to be possibly going to be one of the capital city of Tasmania for a while. And it hosted a stock exchange, and it hosted various other...
In this small town?
In this small town, there was a stock exchange, yeah.
Okay.
And there was an old metallurgy, if you like, school here, because this was where metallurgy, on the island of Tasmania, is where they'd made some huge metallurgical advances. The pyrite sulfur smelter that Mount Lyell is famous for was generated by a guy called Strict. He developed it down there. So this island here became quite a hub of ingenuity in the mining and exploration business. And this town that we're in, Zeehan, was the silver capital.
And then we're going to go up to your projects here, or to your other project here in a second. This is the AMC project. I believe we're going to look at the Alpine target. As far as I understand it, different geology though. So we were in volcanics in Queenstown. What are we looking at here?
These are arthrometamorphic belt, which is slightly older. It's a similar style of host rock, but lithologically somewhat different. The host is probably more related to some of the rocks that are in North America, whereas Mount Reed is more related to some of the rocks that were on the mainland Australia. So it's been what's called abducted onto an island platform here. So it's come from hundreds of thousands of miles away, and in Pangaea moved towards and crushed up against a unit that was sort of residing in this general area, and created the island of Tasmania. So the western side rocks came from a completely different area.
So they're the rocks that we're going to look at here. They're older,
by a few 100 million years. Yeah.
Okay. What does that mean for you? What is it that you're looking for? What's the deposit model here?
It's an IOCG as well. More on the iron and copper than there is on the gold. And it's more traditional style. It's the same host rock that hosts the Savage River iron ore deposit, which there's a port for, and there's several 100 million tons there that are shipped to the coast and then over to China and other locations. But it's more on the less on the gold side, but more on the copper side.
What's the exploration target size here? Again, same question as what I had asked you about the Razorback project. What is it you're looking for here?
Yeah, several 100 million tons of more than % material, but also, strangely enough, on this particular property, we have Savage River type deposits, so we may in fact find an iron mine. We have some very large magnetic anomalies, particularly towards the north, which is great, which is close to where the ports are, Port of Burnie and Latta. And so, yeah, it's not only about the last project that we were looking at, Razorback. It was due to copper gold rare earths. Here it's more about the gold and the iron ore.
Right. So what's your exploration target size? Like what do you have in mind? How big do you like if your geological dreams came true? How big do you want it to get?
Several 100 million tons % copper.
So larger than Razorback.
Razorback, I would like to have a similar sort of size as well. Yeah. Earlier when we were there, I did indicate that it does have that potential. We're still not quite sure what the geology is there, but similar sort of size.
Same questions as I asked you there. Again, driving in here, beautiful scenery, almost again too beautiful. National parks, anything that stops you from doing exploration, anything like that here?
There's a national park that is on the northern coast, but no, not in this area here. There's what's called the Tarkine, and that is probably about 50 kilometers north of here. So where our property is not affected by it.
Right. I did see some burned down trees on the way in, so forest fires, again, same question. Is this area higher risk of forest fires or something like that?
It does have a risk of forest fires, but there haven't been anything major here for a number of years, and I think the local community, the local services have pretty well got it under control. I've noticed that any time there is a fire here, it's pretty well put out pretty quickly.
let's go into the field, and you can show me the topography and hopefully some outcropping mineralization. Or actually, Steve, why don't we do, maybe we'll do kind of an office tour. Do you want to do that?
Sure.
Okay, let's see what we're, I've actually never been to an office, so you could literally tell me anything and I'll probably believe you. How typical is this of an office?
This is very typical. All field op camps that I've ever been to look somewhat similar to this. It's just a basic, very basic looking area that hosts rocks and hosts paperwork. So what we've got down here is all of our files and field equipment at the end, obviously a small kitchen at the back.
Is it, how tidy is this relative to other offices? I suppose that would also be kind of a nuanced, important thing.
It's medium, I would say. Look, it's not a high-end place. You can see we inherited this from someone else,
okay.
And so it's functional. It's good for the size. Actually, I just wanted to bring us attention to this map here. I hadn't noticed this on the wall before. Here's Mount Lyell, and this is the extension. So we have all these sort of interesting maps on the wall to remind the geologists of why we're here and what we're looking at. And here's some good examples of the rocks themselves that have been found in the area. And this is an amazing sample from Rose, extremely heavy. There's chalcopyrite, there's some lead in here, and there'll be some zinc as well. So, yeah, all of these are pretty typical of an office. You put your best samples around for people to take a look at, and visitors like yourself. And then you have some pretty simple offices that people come and work at when they're actually working here.
What's the TV for?
Oh, that's so we can have our presentations. No, we have a lot of data and we have to review a lot of data. It just helps them, yeah.
It's not to watch TV though.
Well, you can watch the odd league soccer game. I understand. People have told me.
So there's actually a bunch of guys working here. Do you have like hygiene checkups? So like how important is that? Like to actually keep the office clean? I suppose it's when you have a bunch of guys working together, that can get messy.
I think, if I'm correct, the person who's the field assistant's mother comes and helps to clean the office. Yeah. So it's all a bit of a family affair here. Yeah, no. We haven't got too many people, so it's not hard to keep clean, and we, make sure we do our own laundry. We do everything, ourselves.
And that's the only. This is the only office you have in Tasmania. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, we do have a couple of other buildings that we in Queenstown that for residential purposes, but this is the only office that we have.
What does this cost you? This place a month?
About 2,000, I think, Aussie.
2,000 Aussie for the whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I should think relocating to here.
Yeah, we have a long-term contract which I think we just renewed, but yeah, pretty reasonable.
What about residential? What do you mean by that? Is that for like when crew comes in from other parts of Tassie, they sleep? Okay.
It's sometimes easier. Like in high season, it's sometimes difficult to get rooms. So we have our own, and it's less than 1,500 a month to have a 4-bedroom house in Queenstown.
Oh, okay. Well, and you said, what about Zeehan? So do you have a separate place in Zeehan, or they stay?
Because if you're working on the AMC projects closer to here, and if you're working on Razorbacks closer to there, we don't want people driving late at night. I told you there's a lot of animals on the road late at night, and obviously for tiredness, for safety, we have 2 separate places.
Right. Let's actually go into the field now. All right, John, so we are standing at the Alpine outcropping Gossan. What is it that we're looking at?
Yeah, so we're standing on the western edge of the Alpine stellar zone mineralisation. There's a window here, maybe 50 by 100 metres wide, where we see the ore body or the mineralisation coming to surface, and it's expressed by this really strong gossanous material, which is the oxidised sulphide ore. So
the brownish or reddish stuff that we're looking at, that's your hematite-magnetite alteration?
No, this is all just iron oxide.
Oh, okay.
So it is hematite, but also goethite,
right,
which are iron oxides. So so any sulphide with iron in it, the copper is leached out and the iron remains. What
is it telling you though that it, because it's quite the large area that is just alteration up at surface? What does that mean in terms of is it telling you anything about depth, geometry, or anything else?
It's telling us mineralisation does come to surface and very close to surface. For most of the extent of the mineralisation, which extends 600 metres that we know of to the east from here, the mineralisation goes to around 10 to 40 metres below surface, and it's capped by a late basalt and gravel sequence. So it does come very close to surface and to surface outcropping here at Alpine. Yep.
I'll put up the drone in a second so we can actually look at where it goes to and what's to the side. I think to the other side there's that wind farm. I think there's a bunch of wind turbines. What's that?
That's the Granville Harbour Wind Farm.
Okay.
So that was put up maybe 5 years ago, and as you can see, the power lines for that come right through the Alpine property, and they go to the Reese Dam, which is another 5 kilometres.
Is that good, or does it limit you in some type of way?
It doesn't limit us in terms of exploration, but in terms of if this project becomes developed, sometimes we have power right here at the doorstep. We also have sealed road access going right through the property.
Yeah. Well, and it's impossible not to notice, but everything seems burnt down. I mean, we talked about fires, Steve and I, earlier. He said maybe it's not too bad, but this seems pretty extensive. What can you tell me about the fires? Is that something that could be a drawback?
Yeah, it was quite a large wild bushfire that occurred last February, or this February this year. We're at the southern end of that, so it's a lot larger further to the north. It benefits us exploration-wise in that we get better access in the bush. We can get field teams out and get into areas more easily than we could have in the past, and that will help us hopefully find more discoveries.
Does it limit you, though, in terms of seasons, when you can explore and when you can't explore? Because this forest,
I know we explore all year round, and there's always a bushfire risk, but we have protocols in place to monitor that risk.
So now we're standing back in Zeehan, and this is your kind of your field office, if you will, and this is the core from Alpine. Is that right?
Yeah, this is the core from what we call the Alpine Stellar Zone.
Okay. What are we seeing? What are we looking at there?
So we're looking at hole AP35, which is the second last drill hole that we did at the Alpine Stellar Zone, and this was a deeper hole that was testing underneath mineralisation previously drilled higher up in the sequence.
Okay.
This hole intersected 18 metres at 0.9% copper, and that was in a broader zone of 45 metres at 0.62% copper.
Okay. Can I have a look?
Yeah.
So what am I looking at here? I can already see kind of sulfides.
Yeah, so you're looking at the darker material is the magnetite. That's earlier on in the sequence, and then there's a later phase of hematite, sulfides, pyrite, chalcopyrite, and carbonate coming in. And that's bringing in a lot of the high-grade copper. So the bit you're looking at now, this section here, grades around 1 to 1.5% copper.
So how is this different than what we looked at Jukes?
It's a different host rock sequence. So we're in the older basement rock here. So it's Neoproterozoic aged siliciclastics and amphibolite rocks. And these form the Bowery sequence, and that host rock sequence is also what hosts the large Savage River iron ore magnetite mine, and that's an iron oxide apatite style alteration. So typically in IOCG belts you get both IOA without the copper and gold, but you also get typically get copper and gold IOCG models. So when we first picked up that ground, that was our model, was to look for IOCGs in that belt, which is kind of a new thing for that belt as well.
And so does it go from right to left here with the core boxes, from shallow to deeper? How are they?
Yeah, so shallower to your left.
Yeah.
And coming downhole this way.
So deeper, what is it starting to look like? Because this grey stuff doesn't quite look like the sulfide thing that you showed me. What is this that we are looking at?
That's right, you're coming out of the ore zone there. So the contact's somewhere at the end of this core tray. And this is the host rock sequence, which is, we call it politic schist. So it's like a siltstone to sandstone interbedded, and it's been strongly deformed, so it gets this really foliated schistose texture.
It's not all like one pipe that you'd normally get out of a drill rig. It's kind of broken up. Does that tell you anything about the stability of the rock, or why is it broken up like that?
Well, this is probably broken up because there's a fault here, and so when you drill that, the fault would naturally just break and crush the rock, and when you drill that, you get that crushed rock. So
Does that make for more challenging drilling conditions at depth?
Yeah, it can do, absolutely. And we do have some very large structures out there at Alpine. So
Have you lost any core?
some core, some zones. We
Okay.
do have some core loss, but in the ore itself, it's generally quite solid, as you can see. So we get
Yeah.
good recovery in the core zone most of the time.
Right. So what is it telling you about the depth of the system? I mean, the way that it kind of, the drill hole ends here, I can see sort of quartz veining there, if I'm not wrong. What does that tell you about the depth of the system? How deep does it go?
So this is just a section of the hole. It actually, the hole keeps going for another couple of 100 metres, I think.
Okay.
And there was lower grade mineralisation intercepted in that. But we know that the main pipe is fairly steeply dipping, or quite steeply dipping, to the southeast. It's up to 600 metres long, along strike,
Yeah.
and we've drilled it and confirmed mineralisation down to about 400 metres below surface currently.
Right.
And it's still strong, and we think it's getting stronger at depth.
Okay.
So the last two holes we did, which was AP 35 and AP 36, got quite good zones of, so AP 35 was 80 metres at 0.9% copper, AP 36 was, which is about, I think 300 to 400 metres away, got 23 metres at 1.1% copper.
And you think at depth that's all structurally controlled mineralization that you're intercepting?
Yeah, we think it's very strongly structurally controlled, and that's what you look for in ICG systems.
Right.
The faults have a very strong control on the mineralisation.
Did I see some brecciation just before?
Yep, you would see. So there's some breccia there, but it's got a bit of oxide material on it. But you can see some class in there.
You can see the sulfides in the breccia too.
Yeah, this core has oxidised quite a lot.
And this reddish stuff, you said that's hematite alteration, not magnetite.
It's hematite and iron carbonate.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the rusty bits are just oxidized iron?
Yeah, most of the rusty bits are the oxidised iron carbonates.
Is there more sulfides, so there's more chalco and there's more pyrite than it is at Jukes? Does that make sense?
There's more pyrite in the system probably at Alpine.
Okay. Was there any gold in these intercepts?
So far we haven't had much gold coming out at Alpine.
Which is actually good because it could be refractory if there's gold because of the pyrite, right?
Yeah, possibly. We would like some gold, there to be some gold in there. It's always
Wouldn't
nice
we
to
all?
have. But so far, I mean, some holes have had trace amounts of gold, but nothing we would call ore grade. Yeah, but further on regionally in the system, there is quite a lot of gold known, especially in alluvials.
To the north of Alpine.
And no one really knows the source of that yet. But we're hoping it's related to the overall ICG system.
When you say to the north, further on in the system, do you mean to the north of Alpine?
Yeah, to the north along strike, in the same host rock, in the same belt,
Right.
up towards the Savage River mine. There's a lot of gold
Yeah.
out there.
What is it telling you about the lithology, all the scores? Is there something that is particularly of importance to you lithologically?
Well, there is, at Alpine we see there's a certain contact with the Keith River schist and then the Bowery Formation. That seems to be the mineralised contact at Alpine. But we are still really working up, developing what the model is here because it's very complex set of rocks. It's very deformed, big faults. So we are working on that.
Old rocks too, I believe. How old are these rocks?
These are Neo-Proterozoic rocks, so somewhere around 700 to 800 million years old.
Okay.
So
Wow.
these are older than the Mount Reed volcanics, which is what hosts Razorback and Skyline rocks.
Right. That makes them more complex, but it also gives more opportunity for mineralization. Is that right?
I'm not sure about more opportunity, but they are more complex rocks, and this package in general is hosted in what's called the arthrometamorphic complex, which is a belt of crustal scale, high strain deformation,
Right.
and that hosts regionally. It hosts lots of albitite alteration, and that's typically very common with what you see in ICG systems worldwide.
Yeah.
So that's another indication that we're on the right track looking for ICGs in this belt.
Is there anything else to look at on the more shallower end of the system?
Well, these are still fairly deep rocks. You're down a couple of 100 metres. I've just pulled out the mineralised part here.
Okay. Where does mineralization start on these rocks?
Well, at outcrops at surface.
Yeah, from surface.
Yeah.
Also, so exactly at surface.
There are windows where it outcrops at surface. In general, there's a thin cover sequence of 0 to about 40 metres, up to 40 metres, which is just tertiary age basalts and gravels.
Does that make your targeting more difficult?
Yeah, well, it doesn't help because we can't see it outcropping.
Yeah.
But because there's a lot of magnetite in the system, that really helps with targeting. And as we get more knowledge about the system and what the faults are doing, that helps us target.
So your main targeting tool is a geophysical magnetic survey. You're looking for mag highs, essentially.
Yeah, we're looking for mag highs, and at Alpine we also have coincident gravity high.
Okay.
So that's really strong, and that also giving us a quite high confidence that the system is probably extending to depth, and it's just a matter of going in and doing some deep holes to test that.
Is that coinciding with any kind of geochem anomalies or anything else you might have done?
Yeah, well, that cover sequence doesn't help with the surface geochem because it can mask the signature that you might normally get.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so what else is there to look at in this core? I think we've kind of been through most of it.
Yeah, you can see some. So there's some more. I guess there's a host rock class there in the magnetite sulfide breccia.
Yep. That's quite similar to what we saw before, is it?
Yeah. This is a class of host rocks that's been caught up in the ore zone.
And you have kind of these veinlets here that are rusty, essentially.
Yeah, that's the quartz carbonate again.
Okay.
The iron carbonate, so siderite.
Right.
Yeah. So when we first drill that, it's like a cream colour, more like this. But as it's exposed to oxygen, it goes red and brown.
Right, so this concludes the site visit portion of this video, and my time in Tassie here is unfortunately almost over, but the research process has barely even begun, because even if we did assume, and of course it's forward looking because nobody really knows what's under the ground until it's been properly drilled off, but even if we did assume that there is something worth discovering here in Tassie, it's still going to take a whole lot more work and a lot more drilling. Drilling isn't cheap. And the way a company, especially when it's a company that's as small as CopperCorp, finances that drilling can really make or break the whole case. So Stephen's going to drive me to the airport here in a couple of minutes, and I'm going to want to use that time to ask him a couple of questions about strategically, how does he move the company forward? How do you finance this thing? How much more money do you need, and how long it's going to take? Alright, so we're driving back to the airport now on the highway, so it might be a little bit bumpy here, Steve, but I'm thinking, I've kind of seen everything, well, or as much as you'd showed me, really. I hope you showed me everything, or at least most of it, but I'm thinking what really happens here and the business case for CopperCorp. Essentially, I want to talk about money and specifically how you plan on making me some. How much more drilling do you think you need to better understand your projects, Razorback and AMC?
That's a good question. I mean, they both require a different type of a drilling program, maybe a different level of drilling as well. Let me start with AMC. AMC, basically, we've done some internal back of the envelope calculations, and we have some ideas that the type of resource that we have in the ground, which I don't really want to go into at the moment, but we would have to do resource type drilling. So I would imagine that we need to do at least another 10 to 15,000 meters of drilling. This project, though, hasn't drawn the attention of people in the same way that Razorback has. Razorback has some very clear targets. You've been to site now, you've seen how close it is to Mount Lyell, and you've seen the potential that the project actually has. It's roughly 30 kilometers long, 30 to 40 kilometers long, of which we have 6 identified targets, and we have many, many more which require more work. In terms of the amount of drilling, I would say, based on where we are right now, at least 5 to 10,000 meters more of drilling, and I would like to see initially more at Hides and Jukes. So in answer to your question, it requires drilling. We found mineralization. We now need to find a deposit.
Well, so you're talking 10 to 15 on AMC, 10 to 15 on Razorback, so 20 to 30 total across the two projects. Mm-hmm. Well, how long would that take you to do that? Again, and we'll talk about the money here in a second, but let's say you had unlimited money. Do you do it in one season, 2, 3? What are you thinking?
What we would do is we'd have to, obviously the type of drillers that we have here are the number of companies that we have are limited. If we went for a 10,000 meter program, we could probably bring some people in from the mainland and do 24 hours a day drilling. At the moment, how we're coping is we have local drillers who tend to work a 12-hour shift, 6 days a week. So it would be a lot slower. I think at the moment we're still trying to understand the integration of the geophysics and the drilling, and as with all drill projects in a way, is that you learn more the more you drill, and the more that we drill, the more maybe we'd want to do a little bit more geophysics here, there, and maybe more field work in other locations. So I would say that if we had a 10,000 meter plus program, we'd probably try and do it all in one season. We can drill all year round here. There's no problem with that. It's just that it is easier during the summer or in the shoulder seasons when it's a little bit more water in the streams, depending on the size of the program that we're doing.
How much money is that going to get? Well, what are the drilling costs between the different projects?
They're roughly similar, actually. It's about $400 all in for both of them per meter.
So you're talking about $4 to $5 million bucks. That's all in 400, do you say?
Yeah,
dollars?
Yeah, that's right.
That's, what is it, Canadian, Aussie? What do you think?
Well, we're about, Aussie's a little less, 80% of Canadian dollar.
Yeah, but the 400 you told me, that's 400 Australian?
400 Canadian.
Canadian, that is, okay.
Yeah.
So you need $4 to $5 million bucks per project, Canadian, that is, to make that happen, essentially.
What you're talking about is what I would like. What we're probably going to do is something different, but that is what I think this project requires. It's a big company type program. We need a larger budget than we currently have at the moment. So yeah, we're looking at all options on the table between potential partners coming in. We're actually in advanced discussions with one in particular, but there's a few others as well. Or we go out and raise the money for ourselves. I mean, it's one of the two. At the moment, I am not leaning one way or the other.
Well, you're kind of stealing my next question here, because that's typically what I would ask you. Like, well, what do you want to do? Because if I had a magic stick, or if you had a magic stick, you wave it, you get that money, but none of us have that magic stick. So how do you solve it? Is it a JV? Is it maybe a combination of both? You get a JV on Razorback or a JV on AMC, and then you do the rest yourself, or is that an option?
I think you've stolen my answer. It is a combination of both, is what I would like to do. I think we need, part of the reason that I invited you down here is we want to give more exposure to Tasmania. Tasmania is not a well-known international mining jurisdiction. I hope we've managed to convince you that it deserves that accolade. But, at the end of the day, I don't want to give the project away, and I also would like to have a little bit more support for what we're doing. So some sort of senior involvement or a senior company or a large fund involvement. And, I would like to maintain as much as I can for the shareholder, maintain as much of the project equity. And in terms of the share equity, I'm prepared to give some of it away and for the right partner.
Well, that is exactly what the challenge is, I find, when it comes down to small cap explorers with big ambitions and big projects, because oftentimes they'll tell you, oh, well, don't worry about that, we'll just get a JV, and then we'll protect shareholder value. But those two things are not as self-explanatory as they may sound. Like they're not easy things to get done. Getting a JV while not diluting too much asset level interest is really tough. So how do you go about it? Who do you go to? Is that process in progress? I mean, yeah. Yeah,
we're obviously approached at least a dozen companies at the moment, of which I would say 6 have come back at us, of which 3 are showing interest and 1 in particular more interest than others. Look, they all want different angles on, you know, or they've approached it from different angles. And the difficulty we're playing game theory here, where I'm also looking at the general markets. I'm looking at what the value of what we have compared to others is. I don't want to give too much away, but on the other hand, you know, we've got to take this project forward somehow. I would say that a company that comes in who maybe want an offtake, or they want something a bit further down the line than taking you know, a large share of the project equity for a very small amount of investment, is something that we would like to do. But on the other hand, if suddenly the copper market really takes off and you've got a deal where the seniors got rights to 75 or 80% of your company, you're going to look not so clever as you were 6 months earlier. So you're always playing this game with time, what's going on in the general markets, and with what's going on right now with the tariff situation. It's not a defined or easy answer to give you as to what is the best combination. However, I mean, I am talking to a couple of Japanese groups at the moment, and the type of deal that they seem to be proposing is a little bit more palatable than some of the bigger mining companies.
What would it look like in terms of percentages then in that case? Because you said, oh, you don't want to be seen having given away 75 to 80% of the upside if there's a decent copper market. What then is a good amount to give away? Is it half? Do you want to give up 20%? Is that even doable?
I think at the end of the day, any mid-sized or senior company wants at least 51%. So it'd be somewhere between 51 and 75 would be the ideal. But, you know, you're always playing this negotiating game. I mean, the art of the deal, right? This is what we're all playing it, and it's such a fickle market that we're in, that sometimes it really depends on what happened last week, last month, or even in the last few days as to the type of deal that you can secure.
Well, it's a process too, I suppose. So what I'm sitting here wondering is, when is that going to get solved? Because I suppose if you not necessarily, you don't have a money issue from the perspective of, as far as I understand, if you got money to keep the lights on, but of course it's an exploration company, so you want to keep moving, you want to actually start drilling. So what's the timing that you foresee for doing a decent sized drill program? Is that something we see this year? Is it too early? How do you see that?
I say that we could do it this Q3 to Q3 would probably be a good time to start going for it. But, you know, it really depends on how much money we manage to secure by that time, and what type of, you know, involvement we have with a major, or what level of funds that we manage to secure from the open market.
Right. And then you yourself, how do you see your current task? Are you from here on out, where do you go? Like, are you going, is that the first thing you're doing? Are you going and looking for people to finance this thing? Is that what you do?
Yes.
Yeah.
Simple answer. I am.
Yeah. So what does that look like for you? You go to conferences, you're trying to set up personal meetings, or what's the effort?
I'm doing a lot of personal meetings. I am actually attending conferences, but that's where, you know, some of the people I want to meet are going to be, so that's why I'm going to them. I have a mandate right now to try and interest enough people in what we're trying to do here in Tasmania to give us a reasonable sized budget to be able to proceed to the next level.
But you are positive and certain it's going to get drilled this year?
Yes.
Okay. Well, size of the program, you're not committing to that, but we're going to see some holes being put in this year.
Yes.
That's important. It's beautiful here. Everything that you've showed me again is beautiful. We talked about national parks and animals and all that, and I asked you, maybe it even seems too beautiful. We spoke about that already earlier. But it's also not going to be cheap to drill, as we just talked about. So what's driving you, or what I'm really asking here, maybe not dance around, but what I'm asking here is, how do I know this is not another lifestyle company? Because we've seen so many in Canada, especially when it's in beautiful locations or remote and large land packages that always seem to take longer and need more money to be drilled. So how do I know that you're driven by the right thing?
Look, the initial reason why I got involved in this company was that I could see having come from two large companies myself, and early in my career, Rio Tinto, and more lately BHP, I recognize the value of a first world jurisdiction with a large land package in a commodity that the company is seeking. So here we have copper in a first world jurisdiction that is, I don't know, you've spoken to the geologists and you're well aware now that it is possible to get something off the ground in this country. With 4 operating mines, it's possible to actually get to the next level. So what's motivating me is that although it might look like a nice jurisdiction, you know, a nice holiday location, the economy of this state is driven by mining in one very small part of the state. And I would also argue that other areas of the world are equally as beautiful as this, but this is a place where the majority of the politicians, the majority of the people who are working in the geology department, and you've spoken to our geologists, they live and breathe it here. I'm not quite sure if they would look upon it the same way as a visitor would. I don't think it could be considered a lifestyle. It's more of a place that's been overlooked in the past. That's how I'd look upon it. I know that when I was working at BHP, we did overlook this area. We were more focused on the Gawler Craton because we were having some success there when I was working with them. I would say it's been overlooked. It simply is a fantastic jurisdiction in that you know, the mineral deposits are here, but there's not too many juniors that managed to secure large land positions, and we're the largest landowner we got 2% of the land surface of Tasmania, and we're the largest landowner from a junior company in this state.
Yeah. What do you think about your team's incentive? You mentioned the geologist. I did speak to your VP of X, and it was that thing there that I asked him about royalties. He said, I own a royalty on I believe it's part of the project or one of the project. How do I know what's driving them, or how do you see you knowing your team better than I do? What do you think is driving them? Could there be a conflict of interest? Talk to me about that.
I don't think it's a conflict of interest. You've spoken to them. I know them. They're driven by discovery here. At the end of the day, I think you spoke to the geologist and it wasn't even quite clear what level of involvement he got involved with the share price, the founder's shares. No, they're not driven by the greed factor. They're more driven by peer recognition and the fact that they are working. They feel very privileged to be working in a place like this where you can actually, you know, enjoy the services, maybe go home at weekends and everything else. Yes, they're just living like normal people do, but as a geologist, which is a little bit rare in this day and age.
This has been my first site visit ever, and I've had a lot of fun. You've shown me a lot of stuff. What do you think? What are you not showing me? What am I not asking? You were an analyst, right? You went, you did these things actually, essentially the site visits and stuff like that. You went around asking maybe annoying questions to some of the CEOs out there. What am I not asking you? What are you not showing me? If we had, 2 weeks to go through everything, what else would you show me?
Well, that's a good question. I wasn't expecting that one, but I think we have shown you everything, and there is nothing left to show. I mean, at the end of the day, we're now driving in an area that we'd never be allowed to do any mining. So what I like about this province here, or this state here, is that there's designated areas where you can and you can't be doing the type of activities that we do. It's pretty well defined where the mineralization is in state. I don't think I've hidden anything. The one question that we had, and was a discussion we had yesterday, was about one particular area in the world where there was a national park right next door, and what they were trying to mine was within sight of that. Of course, we're not in any of these types of environments that I'm describing that I kind of blew the whistle on, if you like.
Yeah.
So no, that's part of the reason why I do like it here. There is nothing that I can think of that I'm hiding from you here, or there is hidden. It might be just the perception of others, much like a lot of things in life, that things are rosier here than they really are. The area where the mining areas are still somewhat impoverished compared to other areas within Tasmania, and that itself could precipitate some sort of growth, because I have spoken to the minister about this. One of the reasons that our geologists did not move and live right on site and he chooses to live farther away is the childcare and other things. There is room for improvement within the mining areas. So there is enough infrastructure, but the services could be better.
So it's the services essentially then, because that would become a follow-up and last question, I suppose, here is what keeps you up at night? I mean, we talked, and I talked to Tim, your advisor there, and he was like, oh, everything's great. The government wants mining, the people want mining, the infrastructure is there to support it, the weather and the animals and everything allows it. But what then keeps you up at night? I mean, nothing's ever really perfect. So what's the biggest risk for CopperCorp? What's something that keeps you up at night?
Okay, the main risk I have is there enough of the mineral that we see in the ground? We've seen some good indications. Is there enough of the mineral that we're looking for, copper, essentially copper gold, there? The other thing is that you've seen the disconnect between the junior equity market and the price of the various copper and gold and everything else. It's those sort of aspects. It's nothing to do with Tasmania, the services, their infrastructure, the workforce, or any of the usual things, First Nations even. We don't have any of those issues that keep me up at night. What keeps me up at night is can I convince people that this is a great jurisdiction to work in? Can I raise enough funds to be able to do the drill program that the Vice President of Exploration and Tim Callahan want us to do? And will the political situation suddenly implode again? Because every time we seem to get 3 steps forward in this business, we seem to go 2 steps back for some unknown reason that's completely unrelated to the sector that we're in.
That's it's been a great trip, and it's been a good conversation here in the car as well. I don't think I have anything else to ask you here. Anything that I'm forgetting? Anything that you wish I was asking here at the end?
I don't think so. In good cordon style, are we now going to pull the car over and have a wrestling match in the bushes here? No, it's been great. Thanks very much. It's been great hosting you as well, because I've seen the difference in the 3 days that you've been here between arriving in this beautiful place and enjoying the tourist aspect of it, but then looking at the business central of where we are and where the mining district is, and the big mines that are so close to where we are. And I've seen your cogs of your brain change and say, actually, things that maybe aren't so bad here. I'm not going to talk for you, but I have seen a definite difference over the last 3 days.
And I appreciate you hosting me. It really has been a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to future conversations that are inevitably going to be online as well. But thank you so much for doing this. I really, really do appreciate you hosting me.
Thank you.
And as always, thanks to everyone for watching Resource Talks. I have a couple of more things to say, though. The fact that this company was interviewed here today does not mean that they're necessarily a good or a bad company. I'm not here to endorse nor attack anyone. I am simply here to ask some questions. If you find that I have failed in asking a question that you would have liked to hear an answer to, which will happen as I'm not an experienced interviewer, please let me know, and I will try to correct that mistake in a future interview. As mentioned at the beginning, please understand that mineral exploration and development is an extremely risky business. Losing money is the norm and should be the expectation. This is a very complex sector, and the performance of individual companies typically depends on many different moving particles, including company-specific factors like geology, financing ability, and many others, really, as well as particles that are outside of the company's control, like geopolitics, macroeconomics, commodity prices, and many more, most of which are nearly impossible to fully understand. Moreover, these companies that typically get interviewed on Resource Talks are in the pre-revenue stage, which means they rely on the public markets for the financing of their operations, which could result in shareholder dilution. Furthermore, as a general rule of thumb, you'll be better off understanding that all company communications online, albeit this interview or their website and their presentation and their social media accounts, or even the social media accounts which you thought were your friends and then told you about a stock, everything really that these companies do is intended as marketing. And although I do not make buy or sell recommendations because there is a clear conflict of interest given the nature of my business, many out there do. And you should be aware of that inherent bias, and you should be careful out there. That bias is not always going to be clearly disclosed with everyone out there. So it is safer for you anytime you're watching any type of company specific content to approach it with a dose of skepticism and assume that the party telling you about it is biased in at least some shape or form, because there will always be a bias, again, albeit clear or not. So always ask yourself what the incentive of your counterparty is and never rely on them regardless of their incentives, but instead double check if what they're saying is true, again, by using setterplus.ca. The fact that I have no idea what I'm doing should already be clear to you at this point. I am not saying this to make jokes or laugh with myself. I just simply do not have a long enough track record of consistent investment profits. So I should under no circumstances be considered an authority on anything. Again, although this may sound amusing to you, believe me, it is not amusing, and it is not intended as a joke. I'm simply pointing out a fact and warning you not to rely on anything I do or say. Unfortunately, at least to my understanding, nobody out there has any special abilities. The CEOs do not possess any superior knowledge, and they cannot know about what will go up, what will go down, or what will go in circles. Some people even believe that to be rule number one on Wall Street. Nobody really knows. None of us know whether any of the company's activities will result in a success, again, given that we're talking about high-risk activities where most of the times it ends in failure. Also, unfortunately, try as I may, I won't always catch all red flags or all challenges with the companies. So even if I did ask a few tough questions in here, don't rely on this being all of the tough questions. Again, these are complicated startups with many moving parts, and I am conflicted given the nature of this business. Therefore, I cannot guarantee the quality of anything presented in this video, and you cannot hold me responsible for any losses or damages stemming from the way you decide to use this interview. Viewers, listeners, and readers acknowledge and agree that the information presented herein did not constitute a solicitation or an offer to buy or sell any security or investment or to participate in any trading strategy. Resource Talks and all parties involved in the management of the business strictly disclaim any and all liability for losses and or damages, whether direct, indirect, special, or consequential, or other consequences, however so caused, arising out of any use or reproduction of the content published by Resource Talks or any decision made or action taken in reliance upon it. By consuming this content, all consumers vow to release Resource Talks and all parties involved in the management of the business from all claims, proceedings, or consequences. This is all to say, I know it's a lot of lawyer talk, but this is all to say that you shouldn't blindly trust me or anybody on the internet, and you should do your own research. Once again, social media is meant for entertainment. It is setterplus.ca where you do your research. That's where you'll find a company's official filings, and I encourage you to read and analyze the Management Information Circular, the financial statements, the Management Discussion and Analysis, and whenever available, the NI 43-101 technical documents. If you don't understand everything in those documents, the chances of you losing money are even higher than they normally are in this space. And as mentioned earlier, the chances of even the best analysts in this sector losing money are extremely high, since this is venture capital and it is not for everybody. I'll leave you with one of Charlie Munger's quotes, which I wish I had listened to more often earlier on, which says, quote, "If you don't understand it, don't do it."